at the idea of using the money Xiaobei spent to kill him for his own benefit. Among the items, he also finds a book titled Shadow Blade, a bronze-rank blade skill, and with a gleam in his eye, he adds it to his growing arsenal. Upon opening the book, Tien is thrilled to find exactly what he needs, knowing that blade skills can help him fully unleash the potential of his blade talent. Without wasting time, he heads to his bedroom, grinning as he slams the door shut and sits on the bed to begin learning. He opens the first chapter of the skill book, ready to dive into training, but reality suddenly strikes him. A wave of panic hits as he realizes Yahello isn't home yet. Fear creeps in, and Tien bolts back to the living room, his mind racing. If Mo Xiaobei had enough information to send an assassin after him, then it's possible Yahello is in danger too. Without a second thought, Tien leaps from the balcony, dashing from rooftop to rooftop, his heart pounding with worry as he prays for his sister's safety. When he arrives at a regular middle school in the downtown area, he lands in the schoolyard and starts searching frantically. Even though he knows this is an ordinary school where martial warriors aren't allowed to cause trouble or harm students, Tien isn't convinced that someone like Xiaobei would care about rules. Suddenly, he feels something poke him in the back. A voice warns him not to move. Reacting instinctively, Tien spins around and prepares to counter, but stops cold when he sees it's his sister, Yahello, holding an umbrella and grinning. She casually explains that she was on cleanup duty after class and had stayed behind to tidy up the rooms, completely unaware of her brother's panic. Walking through the streets on their way back home, Yahello notices her brother completely soaked, barefoot, and without an umbrella. Concerned, she asks him what happened, but instead of telling her the truth, Tien brushes it off with a vague excuse. As they continue walking along the sidewalk, a sleek black-tinted car idles by the roadside. Inside, Mo Xiaobei sits silently, gritting his teeth in frustration, his eyes locked on Tien. He can't understand why his target is still alive and unharmed, and the sight of Ye Tian walking casually beside his sister only fuels his rage. On their way back home, the siblings stop by a sausage shop, and as soon as their order is ready, they enjoy the weather while strolling along the busy street. Tien casually asks Ye Yu what she'd like for dinner, mentioning that he'll be cooking tonight. After thinking for a moment, she requests his signature dish, boiled meat slices. Meanwhile, the same black-tinted car from earlier is still following them, but this time Tien notices it and realizes they're being stalked. Without letting Ye Yu suspect anything, they safely return to their apartment, though Tien keeps an eye on the car still parked outside. Inside, Ye Yu calls him to help set the table for dinner. 3 days pass, the sky's clear, but the stalking continues. Ye Yu is back in class, fully focused on her studies, while Tien watches over her from a nearby rooftop, determined to protect her. That same black-tinted car is parked outside her school, and the thought of his enemy targeting his sister fills him with anger. When the car finally drives away, Tien immediately decides to follow it, hoping it will lead him to some answers. Summoning magic around himself, Tien leaps swiftly from one building to another, and arrives at the location where the black car has stopped near a construction site. Landing quietly on top of a construction crane for a better view, he watches as someone steps out of the car and walks into the building. When Tien gets a proper look, he immediately recognizes the man as his enemy. Inside the building, blood stains the floor as a bouncer mercilessly beats a man who lies there begging for mercy, saying he has no money to repay Xiaobei, but promises to return it once he collects enough. He pleads desperately, asking Xiaobei to let him go. Sitting casually against the wall, Xiaobei coldly threatens to double the debt if it's not paid today, reminding the man that borrowing his money comes at a heavy cost. The man kneels, explaining that the interest is unbearable, and he has elderly parents and children to care for, so he truly can't pay today. Before Xiaobei can respond, his main bodyguard walks in, and Xiaobei immediately demands news about the shadow assassin. The bodyguard reports that the assassin has disappeared, though he will try to reach him through another contact. Hearing this, Tien now has full confirmation that Xiaobei was behind the assassination attempt. Meanwhile, Xiaobei's frustration boils over, and he kicks the poor man until he dies. Showing no remorse, he orders one of his men to dispose of the body. He then asks his bodyguard if he has figured out how to deal with Tien's sister. Bowing his head slightly, the bodyguard informs him that he plans to hand the task to a friend who has just been released from prison. As Xiaobei walks toward the bodyguard, his frustration boils over. He admits that trusting others was his mistake, and now he'll handle everything himself. Without another word, he throws a punch that knocks the bodyguard to the ground instantly, coldly calling it punishment for failing his duty. Seizing the moment, Tien summons his primordial weapon and launches himself forward to strike Xiaobei from behind. Just in time, Xiaobei turns around, and for a split second, fear flashes across his face. A streak of the blade slices through the air. Although Xiaobei dodges slightly to the side, blood bursts from the cut as Tien's blade finds its mark. Tien stands firm, a wicked grin stretching across his face. The body hits the ground, and the remaining guards gather around in shock, realizing their master has been killed. Frowning, Xiaobei's closest bodyguard assumes the killer used the shadow assassin's skill to hide the body and suspects it might be Li Kun. But after a brief moment of eerie silence, Ye Tian steps out from the shadows, his blades spread wide. As soon as they see him, most of the bodyguards flee in fear, leaving only the main one behind. He stands his ground and confronts Tian, demanding to know how he got the shadow talent. Tian doesn't answer and keeps walking toward him. The man yells louder, insisting he's looked into Tian's background and knows he's just low-tier trash. He demands again to know how someone like him could take down the young master with a single strike, and where Li Kun is. Ignoring every word, Tian leaps into the air and slashes down with precision, slicing the man's throat with ease. Calmly, he wipes the blood from his blades using a handkerchief marked with the Shadow Assassin symbol and tosses it onto the bodies. Before walking away, he glances back and says coldly that he's not some clueless sheep they can slaughter, so they've only got themselves to blame for picking the wrong guy. 1 hour later, Mo-En and his team arrive at the scene, his eyes burning with rage and fury, focused only on finding the person responsible for his son's death. During the investigation, one of his men discovers the handkerchief Ye Tian had left behind, marked with the symbol of a shadow assassin. This confirms their suspicion that a shadow assassin was behind the deaths of Xiao Bei and his men. Just then, Elder Mo, the Grand Elder of the Linhai Base's prestigious Mo family and one of its few great martial warriors, enters the site. Upon seeing him, Mo-En falls to his knees, sobbing and wailing over the loss of his son, the prodigy of the Mo family. In contrast, Elder Mo remains calm and composed, asking Mo-En to stand and speak properly. But Mo-En, overwhelmed by grief, continues crying, unable to compose himself. He mourns that his son had the potential to become a truly great martial warrior, perhaps the one who would have elevated their family to a new level of greatness. Struggling through his sorrow, he informs the Grand Elder that Xiao Bei had just broken through to the martial warrior realm and recently attended his celebratory banquet, only to meet such a brutal end. The Grand Elder agrees that Xiao Bei had immense potential and could have become the second great martial warrior in the family after him, acknowledging that this tragedy has completely shifted the course of their family's future. That being said, Mo-En hands the Grand Elder the handkerchief found at the crime scene, begging him not to let his son's murder go in vain and to avenge Xiao Bei. As the Grand Elder examines the handkerchief, he immediately recognizes that it belongs to a shadow assassin and assumes that one of the families who hold grudges against them must be behind it, as only they would have the means and motive to discreetly hire such a dangerous killer to eliminate someone so influential. However, as he lifts the handkerchief for a closer look, his eyes narrow in surprise, he spots faint traces of iron fang, a detail that instantly startles him. Back at school, Zhang Bao is ranting to Tian about the strength of the Iron Fang base, which is evidently stronger than their Linhai base. He briefly explains that the Mo family's Grand Elder suspects there are families in the Linhai base secretly colluding with the Iron Fang base, possibly aiming to eliminate the younger generation's elites, and then take over the entire Linhai base. Lowering his voice, Zhang Bao adds that he even heard Mo Xiaobei was killed right after breaking through to the martial warrior realm. Hearing this, Tian keeps a calm expression, hiding the grin that threatens to appear, relieved that no one is suspecting him of the crime. At the same time, Zhang calls Tian lucky for not getting killed, since Xiaobei had planned to take care of him once he became a martial warrior. Silently listening, Tian falls into thought, remembering that he was the one who planted Li Kun's handkerchief at the crime scene, the one marked with the word shadow, to steer suspicion away from himself. But he never expected the Grand Elder to find the Iron Fang base's symbol on that same piece of cloth. Now Tian isn't sure if he accidentally exposed a hidden plot from Iron Fang or if the old man is twisting things for his own political gain. The next morning at 4, Tian wakes up and gets ready for training. Just as he's about to leave, his sister Ye Yu stops him, worried and asking where he's going so early. Tian tells her he's heading to the Wild Zone to train. He needs to grow stronger as quickly as possible. Ye Yu frowns, upset that he just returned a few days ago and is already leaving again. Before he can step out, she runs up and hugs him from behind, and Tian gently promises that he'll be back soon. Upon arriving at the Wild Zone, Tian scans the area carefully. Rumors say that high-level monsters roam here, but with his current strength, he knows better than to venture too deep. For now, he sticks to the outer edge, where the lower-level monsters lurk, playing it safe while still pushing himself to grow stronger. With a determined grin, Tian tells himself that this time, he'll become a martial warrior no matter what. Just as he begins his hunt, the ground suddenly starts to shake, and panic flashes across his face as he wonders if it's an earthquake. But when he turns around, he spots the source, an armored ox with a weak-tier bloodline talent and a low-tier defense talent. Tian studies its status window and hums to himself, calmly analyzing the situation and wondering whether the monster has seen him. The answer comes quickly as the ox charges straight at him. Instead of dodging or retreating, Tian tosses his bag to the ground and lunges forward to meet it head-on. Leaping into the air, he summons his primordial dagger and strikes, but the monster activates its defense talent, creating a shield around itself that blocks the attack from all sides. The ox roars, sending out a powerful shockwave that blasts Tien backward and slams him into a nearby rock. Despite the hit, Tien stands up with a wicked smile, praising the monster's talent and declaring that it will soon be his. Holding both primordial daggers, he moves forward again with confidence while the monster waits in place, roaring with intensity as it prepares for the next strike. The monster struck the ground with its hoof, its eyes burning with red fire as it opened its mouth and charged forward. Raising his dagger, Tien smirked and vowed to himself that he would make the low-tier defense talent his. Without hesitation, he lunged forward and leapt onto the ox's massive body. Once above its head, Tien recalled that most monsters tend to have the same weak spot. Gripping his weapons tightly, he drove the daggers into the protective field around the ox. He poured all his strength into breaking through, but the barrier held firm. Then, his dagger struck the same point again, and a crack appeared in the shield, but the dagger shattered in the process. Tien hadn't expected a monster with a low-tier defense talent to be this tough. Just as he refocused on the ox, it swung its fist and sent him flying. Gritting his teeth, Tien tried to regain control, but he was hurled into a cluster of rocks, raising a cloud of dust around him. Still, he refused to give up. Clutching his other dagger, he stood up with even more determination to claim the talent. The more pain he felt, the more he desired the ability. Suddenly, a notification popped up in front of him, revealing that the talent copying cooldown was 16 days. Ignoring the detail for now, Tien picked up one of the broken daggers and reflected. Judging by its abilities, the armored ox should fall somewhere between the silver moon wolf and the viper. Since the ox had a large body, if he could pinpoint its weak spot and launch precise surprise attacks, he knew he still had a real shot at victory. Using the shadow talent, Tien darts forward, circling the monster several times. The tip of his dagger strikes the protective barrier repeatedly, but it still can't pierce through. While the shadow talent is working in his favor, keeping the monster unaware of his attacks, his blade talent is proving useless against the solid defense shield. Frustration boils inside him as he struggles to find any weak spot. He starts to wonder if this defense talent has any gaps at all, but after a closer look he notices something. The barrier appears noticeably thinner around the monster's butt. Scratching his cheek and a little unsure, Tien mutters to himself that maybe this is the weak point. Without wasting time, he activates his shadow talent and rushes in, aiming the dagger right at the spot. As soon as the blade pierces through, the monster lets out a thunderous roar, and within seconds, its massive body collapses to the ground. A pool of mucus spreads beneath it as it lies there cold and lifeless. Squinting with a smug look, Tien can't help but feel proud that his guess was right after all. Just as Tien had expected, once the monster was dead, the blade pierced through its body with ease, making him realize that no matter how much strength or capability someone has, death renders it all meaningless. He begins storing the monster's blood in several glass flasks, wiping the sweat from his forehead as he finishes. Noticing the ox's thick hide, he knows it will fetch a good price, so he also plans to take its eyes and testicles. However, the most valuable part is the pair of horns, and with a swift swing of his dagger, he cuts them clean off. Loading all the loot onto his back, Tien sets off in search of a quiet place to cultivate. Eventually, he finds a cave and settles there in peace. Taking a deep breath, he places the fresh monster blood beside his sister's peanuts, which he uses to mask the awful taste. Staring at the flasks, he plans to rely on them to push through to the martial warrior realm. Picking up one of the bottles, he gulps down the blood and quickly chews peanuts afterward. Instantly, a powerful wave of energy surrounds him, and his cultivation begins. 20 days later, inside the cave, Tien lets out a long breath, but then his eyes suddenly ignite with blue flames, and a piercing scream bursts from his mouth as lightning surges through the entire cave. The ground outside shakes from the aftershocks of his transformation. Two girls stand near the cave. One of them, wearing a red cloak, finds it amusing that someone would choose to break through to the martial warrior realm in such a barren and isolated place. Meanwhile, the other girl, dressed in a black cloak with the martial pavilion symbol on it, remains quiet but offers a faint smile, clearly intrigued by what she's sensing. Back inside the cave, Tien feels a powerful surge of energy and instantly recognizes it as the martial warrior realm. His mind quickly shifts to the armored ox he defeated, remembering that the talent copying cooldown was 16 days and realizing it has now been 20. He rushes back to the spot where he left the ox, hoping to copy its defense talent. However, upon arrival, he finds only the skeleton remains, making it impossible to copy the talent. Frustrated, he regrets cutting the monster into so many pieces. On the other side, the red-cloaked girl wonders if Tien might have been the one who killed the monster. The girl in black shakes her head and disagrees, pointing out that the creature had been dead for days, while Tien only just broke through to the martial warrior realm. She adds that it would have been impossible for a martial apprentice to defeat such a monster, but still quietly praises his courage for even daring to scavenge in such a dangerous mountain. Before heading back home, Tien takes off his clothes to go for a swim, having spent 20 days in the wild zone. Seeing this, both girls quickly freak out and, completely embarrassed, decide to leave. Later, at the Linhai base's martial marketplace, Tian explores the area and is impressed by how massive the market is. As he continues walking, he spots a shop in front of him